Hello, hello, bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to episode 27 of Little Things for Bonsai People. And this time I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mike Lane of Kitsune Bonsai. How's it going, Mike?
Hey guys, how's it going?
And also Carmen Leskoviansky. I'm nailing her last name every time now. How's it going, Carmen?
Very good. I'm very proud of you.
Yep, everyone's proud of me. That's what Mom says. And we're very special guest today. We're excited to have Michael Hagedorn on the podcast. How's it going, Michael?
Hey, great. Great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for hanging out. Today we'll be talking to Michael and talking about bonsai, anything that he does with bonsai, collaborative projects, and other things that he's done with the local bonsai community up in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm sure there's plenty to talk about. But before we get started with that, do need to mention that our podcast is sponsored by our amazing patrons over at patreon.com. You can go to patreon.com/little things for bonsai people and become a bonsai best bud. Our best buds are Tori Solis, Warehouse Rats, Boyd Snellgrove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers, Ryan Gliarando, that guy's name, Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia, the Ladies at the Flower Market, Taylor Peacock, and our newest bonsai best bud and a good friend of mine, Chase Pertweet. Thanks for becoming a bonsai best bud. If you'd like to support the show, you can also head over to our online handles. You can go to Instagram and Facebook for our various pages that we have. For Michael, you can go check out Kitsune Bonsai on Instagram. You can go check out the website, kitsunebonsai.com. For Carmen, she is one of the co-founders of the Purple Pot Society, the Women's National Bonsai Club. Go over to purplepotsociety.org to check that out. It's $35 for the year to become a member. It's an amazing amount of content for what that's worth. Also, go check out Becoming Bonsai on Instagram. But if all you can do is listen, that's fine. Go over and subscribe on your favorite listening platform. Really helps out the algorithm. And I always got to mention our amazing editor, Matt. Go check out mattodonnell.com. Go see Matt's stuff. Go see his portfolio. He edits our podcast and makes us sound smart, makes us sound crisp. He helps edit out some of the stutters and some of the things that I have a problem with here, apparently. But I get through it, and Matt makes the editing process really easy. So if you want to go to his website, mattodonnell.com, there's a contact form there, and he can reach out to you and work on your project with you when it comes to podcast or music. So how's it going, Michael?
Hey, hi there.
Yep.
I'm doing
Welcome
well.
to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yep. So how are things going in your part of the world?
Oh, golly. Well, we were discussing just a little earlier that usually April is kind of a downtime for us where we get to catch our breath a little bit and take a look at one another. But for some reason, this has been a really busy April, and we've not quite had that pause. It's also been a really late year. I remember the flowering plums were almost a month late coming out in downtown Portland. It just was unbelievable. And I think the azaleas, the Satskis are going to be really, really on pause for quite a while. So we had a really rainy year, and this is our first week of sun. I think we're going to hit 85 this weekend. So we're kind of excited about that.
Now, is it just the sun that kind of triggers everything to come out of dormancy, or is it also kind of the amount of light that they're getting? Or
I don't think it's quite so much light, but it's temperature. The temperature just seems to, it really seems to make things move, especially some of the really cautious plants, that break bud really late, like beech. Beech is kind of a forest tree, but it's also kind of not necessarily high elevation, but higher in your zone. So it comes from a more northern territory, and those tend to be kind of cautious plants because they can have late frost and things. It's almost like mountainous plants are very cautious, so they break bud late, and it's definitely the last plant that we get to break bud in my garden at any rate. So we still haven't repotted. This is like late April. We still haven't repotted in Portland, Oregon. It's crazy.
Yeah, next week is looking good for the beach.
Yeah, I think we're about ready.
And what are some of the dangers of repotting something too early?
Slaughtering.
Slaughtering.
No,
Yeah,
you can set them back a little bit, for sure. Deciduous trees do have a bit of a range. I mean, everything does, and it's really dependent upon your aftercare. If you got a greenhouse, you can do a lot of things.
right.
You're keeping those plants away from too much rain. You're increasing the ambient temperature by even 5 degrees. If it's cloudy out, it's still going to be 5 degrees warmer in there, if not more. And that, even if you don't have like root pads and things, that's just going to spur your root growth. So really, the temperature is really a big one.
Yeah.
For them. But how about you guys? I heard the rest of the country was kind of early. It was kind of hot. Is that right? Were you guys pretty early? Yeah, I see Evan nodding his head. Is that right?
Yeah, we were definitely early. I was putting grafts and things in February, like tropicals, I mean. So
Yeah.
Okay.
we were starting pretty early this year.
Yeah, I would say February was
Yeah.
basically the ending of my repotting, because I started repotting in early January, just to make up all the last time. And then by the end of February, I had first flush hardening off, and I just trimmed back, and
Wow.
we got a weird cool
Gosh.
season. Out of nowhere, it cooled off, and then everything just stopped suddenly.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to kick back up. We're starting to be kind of more on par with what I expect.
That's a great example. Heat is the gas pedal.
Yeah.
Yep.
We think it's, fertilizer, and to some degree it is, or a lot of water, and to some degree it is, but it's really heat that makes all these processes work faster.
Would you say it's a root temperature that encourages more growth? That's something I've heard.
Maybe root, yeah. But if you notice, even in areas where you're a bit cooler, generally, some of the northern forests or whatnot, when you have those warm days, the plants will move. The sap really begins to flow. But yeah, you're right. I mean, of course, we have both an advantage and a disadvantage of being in a bonsai pot. Is that the plant is much more susceptible to root temperature. Yeah.
Evan, when you mentioned that you had already cut back your first flush, I was last week and you said that, I was like completely blown away. Like, we barely have leaves on the maples still. Like,
Oh yeah, I'm already to like pinching out maples right now, trying to get them to slow down. And my Japanese black pine extensions are starting to. They're not really getting to the point where the candles are starting to really come out, but I mean the new growth is there, and I don't know how it is down in Florida for you, Mike, but our Japanese black pines, they get like double grow season here.
Oh yeah, no, I know, and they grow like crazy. So I've already got candles on like all the healthy pines I had. The ones that were a little unhealthy took a little longer, but they're starting to push candles now too, and already, and so it's they're gonna get pretty long if I wait until the end of the summer to trim them off.
Yeah,
But we're just gonna ride it out.
it's a learning curve with Japanese black pine in these warmer climates for
Well,
sure.
we don't get our first frost until January, and
Yep.
so it's really, really tricky to time 6 weeks before that. And you can't really go with the end of summer anymore. So I've toyed with doing it in like November and stuff like that and had pretty good success.
Yeah, I don't know. Japanese black pines are just weird here. I wish I did have more consistent temperatures like Pacific Northwest has, honestly.
I still love growing them though.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been messing around with the local loblollies. I know you'll have the slash down where you're at, Mike.
Yeah.
But I saw an amazing loblolly at Andrew's collection.
Yeah.
We have them everywhere here, and that came from Telperian Farms. Yeah, so
Yeah, the decandling is really pretty interesting. It's another one that we can flag as a really solid plant to decandle, the loblolly pine.
Really?
In our area, I think he's just doing a single decandling, but I think he does it a little later It's
Mm.
almost like Japanese red pine, which is in Japan, it's often considered stronger than the Japanese black pine. They decandle it, a week later or something like that, just to shorten the growing season a bit more. And the loblolly is it's just so strong.
Yeah, and the candles look weird on it. They're like skinnier and longer.
Yeah. That's
Now,
a funny one.
I'm not too good with pines, Michael. And I've read like some conflicting things. Is it like normal to decandle once at the beginning of the season and once at the end of the season?
No, that's not normal.
Okay.
But whatever's normal depends upon where you live. So
Sure.
you're gonna, if you have a black pine in Puerto Rico, or maybe even where you live, yeah, you can decandle them in a couple times in 12 months. But
It's like
I think that the terms are often a little screwy, and sometimes one of us thinking one thing, another thing is thinking another. And decandling, I mean, is generally reserved for cutting off a new shoot that's growing.
okay.
And some people will use that term to talk about thinning the number of shoots that have hardened off in the fall. So we can get into trouble.
I see that, and I think that's been some of the confusion, because when I get away from the semantics of it and I just grow it like how I grow bonsai, it seems to work out okay. I seem to prune it accordingly. But when I get
bonsai don't know linguistics, they're not too tuned to that.
exactly, but when I start trying to get into the like what do they mean by candling, and getting the different advice has been tricky. So I've just been reverting back to what I know.
Yeah, good. But black pine is many different ways of handling the same subject, and they all can work.
Sure.
We can argue, till the end of the summer, about which ones are better than others. But taking a system and doing everything sort of to the letter according to that system is a really powerful way to do anything. If you mix and match according to what you've learned here and there, it might not work. But if the masters in Japan are doing things slightly differently, and they have reasons for it, but if you do A, B, and C, but then don't do D and E, or whatnot, or you mix all these things up a little bit, you're probably going to have different results, and maybe not as good results. But black pine is such a strong tree that it can be handled in several different ways. I think that, I don't know if this is, I've often thought that the lower the energy of the tree, the less options we have. And the stronger the energy of the tree, the more you're going to find techniques be a little bit various, and your options expanding a little bit.
So yeah, Michael, tell us a little bit about some of the collaborative projects that you've been doing. That you put one into show recently, the expo. You put that armature right into the show. So tell us about that and some of the other stuff you've been doing.
Sure. Yeah. How about I start with a little bit of a backstory?
Of course.
So I was trained, in quotation marks. I was trained to be an artist in college and graduate school, and that was really a solo endeavor. We didn't really do work in teams. It wasn't like city art where you're installing something, or that usually involves a lot of people. But it was really private sort of work, a solo endeavor. And when I came to work in the studio, when I got back from Japan, the work that I did in the seasonal classes was initially, I think I only did this for like a year, was initially just working on trees that were bonsai that you would claim to be, very obviously bonsai in the frame of bonsai. And I quickly realized that I had, 4 or 5 people there who had rare skills, and we could tackle projects that were complex and beyond my own ability. Not in terms of what you might do with a bonsai, but what you might do that wasn't a bonsai. So what, in other words, what I was really starting to play with in those early years, which would be 2008, 2009, 2010, was starting to work on presentations that were different. So the bonsai, how I worked on the tree was still very Japanese, really. And yet how I presented it was something that was a bit more personal. And it was a struggle for me, actually, this working with multiple people, trying to organize how people would play roles and would serve the need of the project with, the skills that they had that I didn't have. And it was a bit more like a conductor, and I wasn't used to being a conductor. That wasn't, that wasn't my background. So anyway, it was, there were years of adjustment, really. And I was kind of glad that some of those classes were a little bit small, so I could kind of figure out, and they were filled with friends too. So it gave me a little bit of a break. But eventually I really started to enjoy it. I don't know, this was probably starting in 2015 or something like that, 2013, when Bobby Curtright came in as my first apprentice. So I started to work with some interesting projects. Of course, he and I were doing some things, just the two of us. But then I started to realize really the strengths of the collaborative process, and that you can throw out ideas. The conductor throws out an idea, and the band members will mirror back solutions, and ones that I would have never come to on my own. And so it became it's a real tensile strength. It's almost like tempering an idea. And I really enjoyed that. And I think that I know that we created things that were far better than I could have ever done by myself. And the short pine that you just mentioned that was in an expo, I think is a great example of that. I talked with my friend Eric Radebau, who welded that stand. He's an architect and he loves to weld. He's a very creative guy. I think many things made me think he was just kind of a rare being, but one of them was the day he said, I want to build a car. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, I want to build a car, like from scratch. Oh, okay. So
yeah,
it was just really just out of the box kind of guy. So I had this, we went outside and I said, this is a pine that I'd like to put on some kind of a stand that would be shown in a indoor space. At the time, it was hanging off of our shade cloth structure. We had bolted it onto a piece of metal there, and onto an upright. And I wanted to put it onto something that would present the tree to show a bit of precariousness. And so how I wanted to do that was with kind of a cantilever, so with a counterweight. So for those of you who know this piece, it has this kind of scale-like metal bars that connect together that hold this tree in space far away from the base. And the base is actually 50 or 60 pounds. It doesn't look it, but it is really, really heavy.
Very heavy.
You'll be aware of it when you attempt to pick it up. Yeah. So I had no idea how to do this. And so I just sort of sketched it in the air and said, what do you think? And then we began this process of, okay, great. Let's play. So, we did little cardboard mock-ups, and it's like, this looks good. And it was just sort of this banter. And he went home and said, yeah, we'll probably go through one or two renditions of this before we get something that work. And it was number 2 was great. First one we did first we were working with sort of a helix idea. Unfortunately, that made the metal bend too much, so the tree bent this thing over, so that didn't work. So we had to have something that was in line with the weight, so that it was stiff. And so anyway, we learned some pretty good lessons on the first one that maybe your structural engineer would have figured out the first time, but it was an awful lot of fun. And then he came back for another project. We have a little juniper that also hangs off that shade cloth structure. And we're putting both of these trees into an exhibition I'm really looking forward to at the Pacific Bonsai Museum up in Federal Way, Washington, where Aaron Packard is the curator and who has continued since day one to put on some really thoughtful, kind of challenging shows. And this one is called Avant Garden. So work that is a bit outside the box. And so he's invited several people to put some trees in. I'll have those 2 trees in there. And Eric just finished, actually, he just brought it by the studio today, kind of this looping stand that kind of bounces across the tabletop in this sort of arcing thing. And I was attempting to, my thought, I mean, these are all abstractions, right? But my thought of that was this sort of timeline, you know, how a tree kind of goes up and down in its life pattern. And the idea behind the other stand for the pine was precariousness, but also the scales that kind of connect and hold the tree up are abstractions of a pine cone scale.
Oh, that's cool.
The other one has less of a, you know, an obvious sort of image, but so anyway, I'm excited about those, and this collaborative approach continues to feed me. Almost more so than some of the crafting of the bonsai itself. The presentation it seems to be limitless.
Yeah, it's almost bigger. You know, it's almost yeah, I could see that. That's very cool.
Yeah, the shore pine itself is not what you would expect either. It's got two apeces, you guess you can say, like one coming off to the side and one dropping down, which I found to be very unique, almost a double-headed literati in a way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, when I collected that tree, I was just sort of in bonsai mode, and I thought, I'll probably have to cut one of those off to make that into a bonsai. And of course, it sat there for 2 years before I could do anything with it as it recovered its energy, its sort of youthful vigor. And by that point, I was like, oh man, I could never cut off one of those. I got to find something else to do with it. So it was actually, it was one of the trees that really made me rethink what it was I was purchasing in terms of raw stock. And I'm far more interested in these just sort of wonky things that I have absolutely no idea what I would do with. And then I spend a few years thinking about it. I'm much less afraid about taking that much time to think about what kind of a solution would both fall into line with harmony and asymmetry, but approaching that idea in a different way than maybe we traditionally do with bonsai.
I think that's a big part of kind of more, I don't know. Once you've done bonsai for many years, I think that true kind of state of true patience, I guess, comes in, where I don't really think of myself as waiting for things to happen. I enjoy the journey of just sitting and contemplating, like you said, solving some of these problems. And, some of these trees, now that I've been doing this as long as I have, I do sit on for like a year or so, maybe 2, and really kind of think about what I'm going to do with it before I make any big critical changes.
Yeah.
I usually tell people a lot that, with demo culture, you see one like glimmer, one little snapshot of time, when the reality is like I might put on 1 or 2 pieces of wire and then walk away and then come back later and put on another 2 pieces of wire. And I'm really chipping away at the whole before I really see maybe what I want to see. So you get that.
Yeah.
I really enjoy seeing bonsai more as process art than, like you said, with the demo culture. That's where we're kind of coming around to it at. It makes it a lot more enjoyable that way. And like you said, all we have is time with these bonsai. I mean, that's what we should be really putting into them to get the effect of the older look that we're looking for, or just a difficult tree that is unpredictable, So
that's that's an interesting point, because time as a medium, something that you can kind of apply as a piece of clothing or something like that to a bonsai.
So how does this? Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
I'm just remembering a funny story regarding deciding what to do with the plant in Japan. Suzuki had the film crew of Kimball over there, and we were filming something else at the time. But he had this really famous white pine in there that many other famous people had worked on, and they'd all chose different fronts on it. And so it was like it had 3 or 4 possible fronts. It was a really, really interesting, good tree. And the head guy there at Kimball and said, so where's your front? So he said, I have no idea. I had been in the garden for some months, but he just, not sure yet. He was really honest about it. Yeah. Anyway, Carmen, please.
That's a great segue, actually, because I'm curious as to how this technique differs or doesn't differ from how they approach trees in Japan. Are there often trees in the yard that have this long period of contemplation before anything is done with them? And then additionally, kind of part 2 of this question is the way some of the bonsai are approached here at Crataegus is very artistic. It's outside of the box. It's, something a little bit different. And is that, I feel like in Japan, bonsai is generally more, a business. So maybe they don't have the time to put in that kind of artistic work. Yeah. And so how does that differ too from what we're doing here versus what's going on in Japan? Is there an artistic bent there at all?
Yeah. Oh, there is. You can see even some of the pots that are coming out. Gyozan, for instance, he's got this catalog that he puts out, and I think I don't know, it might even be mostly for foreigners. I've often wondered, but
maybe.
Bobby has sold these. They're spectacular.
They're so cool.
Very inventive and challenging pots, and almost caricatures. They're really fun with these big fat lips, or they just look like these cartoons. Really, really, really fun. I had a conversation with Ryan Neal about that group of potters, that would just sort of make a cartoon of different features. It just sort of almost like they're under a magnifying glass or something like that. And it becomes something else when you do that, the elements of the pot become sort of distorted, and it's almost humorous. It's fun. But I don't know, it's attempt a question. I can't really speak for other gardens in Japan, but as an overview, absolutely right. The business is there, and there's a lot more selling there than in your typical bonsai yard in the United States, where a bonsai professional here might make the majority of their income teaching, and whereas over there, one day a month they might have, their club meeting or something where a master helps some people, but they don't make it, much of an income off of that. I have the ability to be a bit of a gadfly because I make my money different way. I don't need to sell what I create. So I don't really care what the public thinks about what I'm doing. And there's a freedom in that. I think I've said this on other podcasts, but my dad was an academic, and there's certain freedoms in being able to be a sort of a gadfly and saying what you really think, and not fearing being fired for it or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's a little different, private sector versus academia. So in a sense, I saw that when I was a kid, when I was sort of watching what was going on with my dad and my colleagues, and I kind of liked that. And I have tried to kind of steer my business so that I'm, client work is a chunk, but teaching is a big chunk as well. And that gives me a certain freedom to creatively do things, whatever I feel led to do. I had another, Carmen, help me. Who are we talking with? The folks from Ohio. There was another podcast. I talked more on that podcast about this.
Oh my gosh. The Bonsai Time podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bonsai Time. Yeah, that was if anybody's interested in this conversation, there's another conversation out there that was related, and I enjoyed that one as well. These are really interesting things to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for raising this as our kind of centerpiece to talk about. When I go to work with a client, I'm mostly working within the Japanese tradition. Almost everything is falls within that frame, and I love that. I mean, it's a touchstone, and I love working on projects that my clients are curious about. They're also many of them are interested in working on some young trees too, and working them toward a certain vision, and that's a lot of fun. And they're often species that I wouldn't or don't have in my own yard, so there's a educational value to that as well. It's kind of fun. But so there's a difference too. So what I do outside of my own garden is up to the client. Really, I'm trying to serve the client. Yeah.
So the more of the future of your collection will be moved towards these creative projects. You see, that's kind of what you're going to aim to do more of.
I think none of them have left the yard. I don't really sell them or haven't yet. I mean, eventually I'm sure I will do something like that, but so they keep building. The percentage keeps building because there's no outlet from the pond, so to speak.
I think we're going to perfect the cantilever.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. There's been a significant cantilevering the last couple of years, so it's fun to see all the different kind of iterations of the different angles and things. Yeah.
There's a few. I think the first one was a vine maple that some people call the moose or the boot or something like that. It has a nickname, but moose. You can go to my blog and Google this thing. But it's also a cantilever. There's on the foot part of it. I don't know where the boot is, but anyway, the part that touches the ground, there's a big rock there that is covered in moss. You can't really see it, but that's the counterweight for that crazy construction. And I think that was back in the Bobby era. That was a long time ago. But these have been fun projects because I had to figure out how to, on these strange slab, that were on funny angles and whatnot. Was I going to use soil? What was I going to use as a medium? Because there was no way. I didn't really want to use muck. I've had varying success with muck. Conifers seem to like it. But I wasn't really sure about the deciduous trees. So I just sort of made a guess. I used almost no soil at all. In some of these projects, I used 100% sphagnum moss for the maples. These are vine maples. So this is a Northwest native. And they loved it. They just grow like weeds in it. I was a little surprised, really. But, I read up on sphagnum moss, and as far as rotted sphagnum moss, that could be a lifetime before it begins to rot. It's pretty unique stuff. And any kind of slabby kind of thing, that drainage. I mean, if it's sort of at an angle, the drainage is superb. It's really, really good. So high water holding content, but good drainage. I mean, that was sort of a good mix. Whereas I think in our summers, if I was to use the volcanic mixes that I prefer to use in a pot, I think it would get too dry, and we'd end up having to. Carmen would be far too busy.
Yeah, more watering than I already do.
Exactly.
More water.
Right. So all these most of the suspended pieces, you're using less and less soil, and you're finding with the sphagnum moss. Will it grow like new sphagnum and then replace and recycle?
Funny you should mention that. There was a pot where we had grated up our sphagnum moss and put it on top. We had some live sphagnum start. I think it's the only time I've ever seen that happen.
Doing very well.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Okay.
I need to transplant
I haven't looked at it. That would be fun. Yeah, we'll grow our own sphagnum.
Yeah.
That's funny.
We can strip mine our own yard.
Put it in the back pond there with the ducks.
Right.
That's cool. So, Michael, can I ask you something that I personally wanted to know was I read something in a BCI article about a recent trip, not recent, I think like a year or two ago, where you took a trip to Taiwan.
Oh yeah, 2017 maybe. I think there was a
Okay, yeah, so that was more than 2 years ago.
big convention. It was kind of this compilation of clubs and into one convention. It was a huge thing, a big international thing. That was fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. That's something those are trees that I take a lot of inspiration from and, tend to emulate a lot of. And I remember reading that
really good
section of that. Yeah, that's what I thought, what I had heard you say. What was your impression of those trees?
I was amazed. Yeah, it was just, I never seen anything like it. I mean, it's seen, like stamps, out of the Philippines or something. You see this bonsai that's like, what is that thing? They're pemphis or they're the hibiscus that they work with, or they're just crazy plants. Ficus and all of these things are like defoliated. And so if you see a small thing of it or a small image of it, and you don't really know what you're looking at, you're like, what is that? Right. But in person, they're just crazy. And they start from nothing. And in 30 years, they have this massive plant that's incredibly ramified. And I mean, it's almost like Satsuki Azalea. It's almost sort of easy in a way, right. They can just really work it and they can get exactly what they want. It's just high humidity, and growing really fast growing species. I mean, they can grow something from a cutting down there in Taiwan that they could never do in Japan. You could make a huge, plant with a 10-inch trunk in the same amount of time that you could grow a shohin.
Right.
So it's really impressive.
Yeah.
I was sad that I didn't really have time to go on any of the tours. They had some tours of nurseries and whatnot, but I was kind of tied up with things around the convention. I wasn't actually feeling very well that week, so I spent some time just resting. So, but anyway, I at the time even I was just regretting not being able to run around and see more. I would love to go back. It was a neat place too. In fact, wandering around the cities reminded me of Japan.
Really?
Everything just sort of felt the same. It was really interesting. Yeah.
That's
of course, that was one of the occupied territories.
Right. Yeah. For about 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So some of that makes sense. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. As a side note, Tachi told me he was there. Actually, he was at the convention. It was a great reunion. I hadn't seen him for some years, and he said that the relationship with the Taiwanese is very different than the Japanese relationship with the Korean.
Really,
people. Yeah. The Taiwanese feel almost like brothers, according to them. Yeah, so they have a very different. I don't understand how that all was handled differently, but it has a bit of a different feeling, at least for the Japanese.
For our listeners, tell them who Tachi is.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Tachi was my senpai, or working superior. He was an apprentice who came in a little bit earlier than I did, so that means I had to do everything he said. And he was, I think he was 19 when he arrived, and I got there a few months after him at Suzuki's place in Japan, and the Nagano region in Japan. And he was a neat kid. I really enjoyed Tachi. It was good to have an ally, because especially when you're a foreigner, you need allies. You don't get a lot of help otherwise. So that was Tachi. So he was my brother.
That's good.
Yeah. Do you know what he's doing now? I mean, I haven't really.
Oh yeah. He's a busy guy. His father had had his hand in bonsai. He had an antique pot store for a long time. He was the guy who made the calendars in Japan. Had a rooftop garden. So when Tachi escaped from his apprenticeship and graduated, he went back to Tokyo and did a sort of a multi-generational garden there on a rooftop. So he works with clients, and yeah, it's doing quite well. Has a family, 2, 3 kids. I can't remember. I think it might be 3.
Hmm.
City boy. City boy. I think he enjoyed the country, but it was very new for him. We were in a tiny village of 10,000 agricultural area.
And that was in Taiwan, or?
Oh, no, sorry. This is Japan.
Oh, Japan. Sorry.
Yeah. We were both at the same convention in Taiwan. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah. He was also invited to present there. So yeah, it was good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Carmen took off on us.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
She must have stepped away for a moment.
We could take a break.
Oh, no. We're coming towards the end. We do have one listener question that I decided would be a decent little thing to throw in. It does also kind of pertain to Carmen as well, but I'm sure you can kind of elaborate on it too. But I had a listener, Justin Knight, one of our Bonsai Best Buds, who's asking about grafting azaleas. Who's asking about seeing different varieties of azaleas that have different flower colors, but haven't seen any weaker varieties grafted to more robust stock. So he's kind of wondering about the ins and outs of azalea grafting. If that's possible.
Gosh, I wish I could offer something there. I have done no azalea grafting.
Yeah.
I would imagine, I don't really know, but it has a cambium layer like a even thinner than a juniper, and juniper's real thin.
Yeah.
So I think your technique would have to be right on the nose. But I really don't know. Carmen, do you know of grafting azaleas?
I don't. But I feel like I've heard that people have done it, but I don't know that they have. Like I have never done it. And I don't know that it's necessarily a real common thing to do because they're so easy to grow and get, different varieties and different colors. So I wonder if a thread graft might be a good option if you were going to graft an azalea, though, because they grow such strong runners essentially, and it might be easier than trying to do like a veneer graft or something. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that.
I feel like a thread graft would be just that much more challenging because of how brittle they can be.
Yeah, maybe.
Especially if you're trying to fish that through the hole and you're trying not to pop the buds.
I think you just
I
that's think a big you just scion graft it and cut it back hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would like to get an azalea trunk, like a real nice one, and then put all the different colors that I have in my collection on that one trunk, just for funsies,
just to see how
I'll try it and let you guys know how it goes.
Oh God!
But
azalea, just to extend my graduation time again. I have to stay longer now. That's not acceptable.
I'm adding.
I got another 4 years before I can leave. No. I think we added. I think that makes it an 8 extra years. This week I've added. So, oh no,
it's all right. Looks like it could be worse.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh dear.
Oh boy.
But I think I've seen azaleas with different colors on them. I mean, I'm
they do.
bad
some of them
azaleas.
just do it naturally. Like some of them have a white and a pink on them, or an orangey. So
I think that's probably where the question's coming from. He's probably confused as to why he's seeing those different colors.
Mm-hmm.
But for Louisiana, because this is where I know Justin personally, he's here with me. He's actually in my hometown, and we struggle to grow azaleas here, especially Satsukis. They don't grow as robust and as strong as you guys probably could get them. And Mike, I haven't seen many azaleas where you're at either. I mean,
they grow here. Some people grow them, but I don't know, not well, in my opinion.
Is it the lack of the dormant period? Is that the issue?
I'm not sure what it is. Whether it's too humid or fungus issues. I don't know. The reality is this is usually in Florida, if the maintenance routine is too much, like if we have to spray it with too many fungicides and we have to like keep up with too many maintenance issues like that, most people will give up on it.
Okay.
And so will they do well in Florida? Yes, I think they will. If you really are up on your game and you really are taking care of them to the best of your abilities. But I don't think they suffer neglect very well here.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You know, in a zone where they're just happier, they suffer neglect better. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, but they're going to take 2 hits rather than 1 before they tumble off.
Right.
To Neverland. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, because I grow a lot of things that are well outside my zone, but they're very, very. It's a tenuous thing at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Something I think about a lot that I read from your book, Michael, Bonsai Heresy, is your root depth temperature. That section really rang home for me, and I applied a lot of that to some of the stuff that I do with my bonsai down here because of the varying temperatures. And we had talked earlier about root temperature activating the growth in the springtime. I mean, maybe that could be a contributing factor to azaleas and other species here. Maybe I don't know. That's just me kind of throwing, shot in the dark.
I really don't know about azaleas. I would think, somewhere up in elevation slightly in Georgia would be almost like, ideal. They do like the humidity, but they do grow pretty well here in Oregon. That's true too. Pyrrhus, rhododendron, things like that grow really, really well here. It's a funny thing. We were talking about Gary Wood earlier, and he said there's some magic around the 45th parallel maritime. There's something about that just produces this crazy sort of growth. It's got, the day length is implied along with temperature at a certain time of year. And then you got, and then you need your zone. You gotta, if it's a desert, you're going to fight a little bit. But if you've got the Willamette Valley, which is 45th parallel, if you drive down I-5, you cross 45th parallel in the Willamette Valley, and there's just nurseries everywhere here. And I asked Joe Harris once if there was another place, or where other places were, and he said, "There's one in Italy." That's what he said. Yeah, somewhere I don't know, northern Italy, I thought, or something like that. He said, but anyway, that was interesting.
I think, the mild winters and the perpetualness of the spring and the fall. Essentially, I mean, we've had daffodils blooming for 3 months. Like it's perpetual.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely has something to do with how things just grow.
Yeah,
It's
in
wild.
the fall root growth can be as strong as the spring root growth. It's really, and it's a long fall here. So yeah, it's a long growing season, and it has, I don't know, the bell curve is just different. The tail ends are just gone and on and on. So you get a lot of growth that you might not see, but it helps establish a plant or bulk it up, or but we can't do citrus. I see some
the
olive
poor
trees
struggling citrus at the nurseries.
Yeah,
they're not happy.
Yeah. No, and there's some like hardy olives that sort of work here, but nothing like what you'd find in California.
What about silverberry? That's within the olive family, I believe, right?
I think you're right. Elagnus.
Yeah.
I think they're related. Yeah. Golly, I think Andrew has one right now.
I was going to say, I think Andrew has a few of them.
Yeah. I know he's in his first year or two with them, so I don't. It's hard to tell, how things do until you get 5 years in.
Right.
But last time I was there, he had cut it back pretty hard, and it was really coming back.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So we're approaching the end of the show here. We usually, I mean, because of this podcast is more set up to be more educational for beginners all the way to a little bit more advanced. We always do our bonsai word of the week.
Ooh, what's our word this week?
Our word this week is, let's see if I don't butcher this word. Tokonoma. Is that because
yeah.
I know, Michael, you're good with Japanese, right?
Well, it used to be.
Did I? How
Bonsai
close was
Japanese.
I?
It's very good.
Oh, good. Yeah. So a tokonoma is a traditional Japanese style display that would be in an area within your home. It doesn't have to necessarily be inside, though. So, yeah, I mean, and usually we pass the word around the table and kind of talk about it a little bit. But from my experience, because we actually went and visited Bobby Cutright, and he had one in his formal living room space. It was beautifully done too.
Yeah, he has some unusual ones.
Yeah, his display is always really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for and they don't always have to be inside. And have you seen different types of tokonomas, Michael?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So, a great example is a traditional tea house, which is it's like a partly outdoor kind of building. There's usually some sort of opening outside. Portable Japanese Garden has one, and there's a tokonoma on the inside. So that's a structure that may have a completely open space to the outside, but the tokonoma itself usually has features chosen according to what style of tokonoma that you wish for. And there are three main styles. Shin Gyoso. Shin is a very powerful one, tends to have black lacquered elements that are rectilinear. That's sort of the frame or the piece of wood across the front, for instance, in front of the tatami mat. Maybe some of the supports as well. And then, so this is a very strong, usually kind of large. And this is where you maybe put a big conifer or something like that. And gyo is maybe red lacquer. And this is something where you put maybe a big deciduous tree. And so is a little more playful. It might have one of the uprights be an actual branch of a tree, or no support at all in that corner. And so it's more open, with just a simple little tatami mat. Now, might be a place you display a large kusumono, perhaps a very playful space. So people who just have one tend to be somewhere in the middle. They might do a gyo kind of tokonoma. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look. I haven't heard that way of describing the different styles of them before. That's actually pretty awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
To give a little bit more context to listeners, it's the tokonoma is more of an alcove. It could be set into a wall, or like Michael said, like a tea house. And normally it has most of the time they do have a window or a light source that comes from the left. Is that the proper way, or does it come from other ways sometimes?
It can come from different directions. Yeah. If you have multiple ones, in particular. But light, I mean, usually you've got some kind of electric light, in addition to this screen, through rice paper, where you get a bit of diffuse light. And then the height of the tokonoma is another thing to talk about. If you're assuming a seated audience, then your tokonoma is like 30 centimeters off the ground. If you're standing and appreciating, it's more like 50 centimeters.
So you have it more of like and where would a tokonoma be suitable in a household? That's kind of something I'm always kind of been confused about.
I've seen it in a couple different places, but in the traditional home, sometimes it's not far from the entry. So that guests will, but it depends. You've got some more formal areas or where you have a tatami mat in front of it. And that can be, 4 mats or 6 mats or something like that, depending upon how big a party of people you're expecting, or your kind of your tea service or whatever that you would offer somebody. I've seen them in like foyers of traditional homes too. There's a little tokonoma to greet, when you toss your shoes off. And I don't really know how traditional that is, but that might be the only place it fits in a home,
Yeah.
So I see it.
Yeah. And is it true if they're, I think I read this a long while back, that it's proper to have your guests, if you're in a seated area, to have your guests back to your tokonomo so it's not in their face the whole time, and that you as the homeowner or the host have the view of it behind them as kind of more as a polite gesture. I don't know if you've heard that, but I had read that a while back.
But that makes sense. It's very Japanese sensibility. Yeah, it's the same as I don't know, turning around the shoes, for your guests so that they don't have to turn around themselves in order to put their feet in to leave.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know that they'd go that far as well. Okay.
Sure. Also, if you have like a raised tatami mat area where you're going up to seats, somebody will kick their slippers off, and then the host turns those slippers around so that they can just step off into their shoes. That's
Nice.
very traditional Japanese courtesy.
Amazingly polite. Surprised that us Southern boys down here don't do stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
Never too late to start.
Right. Never.
I'm gonna start turning my guests' shoes around, and they're
I
gonna
have
be
new expectations when I
gonna be
visit
like,
you.
why are you touching my shoes? They're filthy. Oh man, it's interesting, but yeah.
Good word. Good word, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
I always like to bring up the ones that are, we could literally say the word, bonsai would be a fun one to just go and just rattle on about, but we've talked about that the whole time. So I always look for the ones that are a little weird, even ones that I don't know too much about, because it's fun to use these terms to fill in the gaps and the spaces of, like we were saying, tradition, to understand where bonsai is coming from, because we need to see it through a different lens sometimes because of the way that Western culture or European culture or whatever other cultures we're seeing the lens through. It always comes back to the Japanese approach and the words have their own meaning. And most of the time there's only one word that represents that special thing in bonsai, from my experience. I don't know. But that's the
And
observation.
we need many words to translate it because we don't have that same concept.
That's where the I don't know comes from. It's like, oh well.
Right.
How do you translate that one kanji, But yeah, could mean a dozen different things to us. But yeah, anyway. Thanks for hanging out, Michael. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, like picking your brain about all the really awesome projects that you've been doing. And
thank you. You got involved in one. That was fun.
Yeah. I wasn't going to bring it up, but yeah, I was there. We were joking about it earlier. How I was
original cantilever.
I was the supporting arms.
Right.
The truly organic arms that were holding it at the angle. But it's fun to know that I helped out with that angle of that tree. A tree looks awesome. That's one that we didn't really touch on too much. It is wasn't that one that was referred to as like the Kraken?
The Kraken, yes.
The Kraken.
Oh gosh. Who gave it that moniker?
I don't know. Definitely wasn't me.
Uh-oh.
It was me. I did it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You're in trouble.
Oh, you added more to your time.
Added more time, yeah.
Oh God, 12 years.
Inappropriate naming. Beep.
Hilarious.
If you look at the thing, it's nuts looking, man. It does look like it does look like a ship would fall into it. Because it's got all the like the really long, and I remember asking you, I was like, how long are you going to allow these branches or these trunk lines? They're not really defined as either or. How long are you going to allow them to stay that long? And you kind of gave me that roundabout answer to it. you know. So
We'll know when we know.
you're like, yeah, well, I don't know.
Right.
There's some things about that piece that are really awesome. That one's also, like we were saying earlier about like with the shoe or the boot, that one's also pure moss, right? That it's planted in.
Yes, correct.
Awesome.
Sphagnum. Yep.
Yep. Cool. But yeah. Yep. Like I was saying, I can't wait to see what else you brew up. There's always awesome collaborations going on. And I think this is where bonsai is kind of moving towards in Western, bonsai. So yeah. Thanks for hanging out, and thanks Mike and Carmen for hanging out and
Yeah, no
talking
problem.
bonsai today.
Anytime.
Yeah, man. So we will catch up with our listeners. We'll see y'all in the next one.
Cheers.
All right, bye.
Bye.